campaigns would bar employees of institutions from asking questions about status, and if for any reasons they found out, they were prohibited from sharing the information with immigration authorities, thus known as hotel. The apprehension of Feliciano Sosa became a perfect moment to mobilize the message of the ADT. And this policy was finally passed after a whole year of struggle in 2007. However, now, 7 years later, students continue to be kept out of schools on the basis of their immigration status. And as such, I argue that schools continue to be border zones for undocumented migrants. In order to make sense of this project, I draw from a number of different theories. I believe that their merging provides us with a fuller picture of how conceptions of membership are developed and deployed, as well as the material effects on undocumented migrants. So I use anti-racist theory as the backbone of the study. Specifically, I draw from George Day's principles of anti-racism to not only center on undocumented migrants and distance my work from deficiency theories, but also to study the effects of race and racism in their lives. I then employ the ideas of border zones, border rhetoricity, to discuss the ways that internal borders mirror the fears and anxieties around ports of entry. This includes the conception that borders act as a protected location that divides the so-called legitimate from the illegitimate, not just from entering the nation, but also from accessing its resources. Using borders in this way allows me to examine how they are constructed across internal sites, including schooling. In addition to the bounding of space, the border is also carried by people who don't fit the prescribed description of national members. In this way, bodies are cartographic. Thus, while not all undocumented migrants are racialized, those who are experience an initial level of suspicion regarding their status, since they're automatically read as not belonging to the national space. The ascribing of borders from the bodies of racialized migrants and the cognitive distancing that this facilitates can be understood as a process of dehumanization, and this is where I draw from the work of Franz Fanon. Dehumanization can occur through invisibilization, manichaeisms, metaphor, and/or animalization, and is served to further the construction of specific communities as the so-called other and as inhuman. In this way, dehumanization can legitimize the employment of violence and oppression of communities constructed as subhuman. And this, of course, is easily achieved given the readily available tropes regarding racialized migrants. Thus, hegemonic ideas consider undocumented migrants as likely abusers of the nation, and it is then constructed as common sense that citizens must protect these institutions and resources. At the same time, we have to remind ourselves that migrants are not passive, and they engage in resistance, and to address this, I employ the concept of counter-narratives from critical race theory, as well as the idea of meta-ideologizing from Chela Sandoval, which I'll explain later in the presentation if I have time. Data from this project stems from 14 participants, from interviews with 14 different participants who were located across different spaces. Some were trustees, some were located in different spaces within the bureaucracy of the TDSB, as well as grassroots activists. It also stems from a review of gray literature from involved organizations, including the Education Rights Task Force, known as Illegal, known as Hotel Coalition, and the Toronto District School Board. And the final set of information stems from my own experiential knowledge as a member of known as Illegal at the time, particularly the Education Anti-Deportation Campaign, and as someone who was working as a liaison between the TDSB and the known as Hotel Coalition to ensure implementation of this policy, which apparently didn't work. So in the dissertation, I begin by looking at how bureaucratic processes within schooling institutions operate as borders for undocumented migrants. As G. McDonald states, quote, the border exists wherever non-status migrants may come into contact or confrontation with institutional settings, whether enrolling children in school, stopped for a traffic violation by police, or asked for a SIM card when applying for a job. So within the school board, the border is present in every interaction with the school, since undocumented migrants are never truly seen. This begins with the enrollment of the student. While the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy emanated from an effort to increase the ability of undocumented migrants to enroll in Toronto District School Board schools, there have been different ways in which the process of registration is still experienced as a border. Firstly, the policy has not been fully implemented and students continue to be kept out of school. In fact, a brand new campaign is now in the works, which should be launched this August. Secondly, in order to enroll, undocumented students must actually prove that they are indeed undocumented. They have to provide information they also have to provide information regarding their date of entry to Canada through an official travel document or a sent affidavit by a community leader. And a more recent phenomenon, Operational Procedure 518, has made it impossible for undocumented students to enroll at a school, and they are forced to go to the head office. So as I argue in the dissertation, bureaucratic procedures lead to the construction and ratification of exclusionary orders. And while the APT was unanimously passed by the board alongside a very clearly outlined implementation plan, its delivery follows sensationalized fears regarding undocumented migrants. And of course, undocumented migrants bear the material consequences of these bordering practices. The other part of the dissertation one of the other chapters is about the ways in which membership is conceptualized and the ways in which it's mobilized in both the Toronto District School Board, but also in grassroots organizing. And to do this, I utilize the concept of framing and how it can explain different ways membership was taken up. Frames shape people's perceptions of the world, how they imagine possible solutions to social problems. In other words, they set the terms of reference as well as the conceptual boundaries of any given topic. In order to make sense of the framing of undocumented migrants in relation to schooling, I look at three distinct groups: the Toronto District School Board, the Education Rights Task Force, and When It's Illegal. I then employ the work of Benford and Stowe, who drove from Kaufman, to examine how frames follow and dictate specific actions. So from the earliest discussions about the passing of Don as Hotel, some TDSB trustees worried that current international visa students would decide to opt out of status to receive free schooling. This initial framing of undocumented migrants as non-members and potentially abusive to collective resources constructed a context of non-action for implementation, as well as additional policing measures. The Education Rights Task Force diverged slightly from this standpoint. While they challenged hegemonic ideas that the social goods must only be delivered to members, this position was mitigated by ideas that children should not be punished for the so-called sins or mistakes of their parents. Thus, while diverging from hegemony by constructing undocumented children as disturbing recipients, they criminalized adults. They criminalized the process of migration and not taking into account the different ways in which the Canadian immigration system is inherently racist and classist. Furthermore, the basis of understanding the problematic solely in relation to legal challenges limited the possibilities of action solely to lobbying and working to enact new policy. Finally, no one is illegal employs what I argue is a clearly legible narrative. Namely, no one is illegal. And the idea that all residents, regardless of status, must receive full benefits of membership. And we can talk about what they mean by residents later on. Furthermore, as a result of anti-racist and anti-colonial theory employed in their work, they benefited from the ability of a wide array of tools and methods to disseminate their message and reach their goals. This included both in-your-face tactics that included the public shaming of the board and trustees, as well as media work and navigation of the board's bureaucracy. So overall, I argue that examining frames in this way demonstrates how understandings of membership and their relationship to undocumented migrants have resulted in widely divergent actions by each set of stakeholders. As a way of concluding the findings of the dissertation, I argue that meta-ideologizing can be of vital importance. Our communities have never been passive, and terms have been crafted to not only explain our condition, but also to resist through shared struggle. However, we have consistently witnessed a co-optation of terms by the dominant. In light of this, we must ensure not just the creation of new terms to define and describe our resistance, but also claim and reclaim ideas that have been diluted to the point of meaninglessness. Michela Sandoval, that ideologizing refers to, quote, the operation of appropriating dominant ideological forms and using them whole in order to transform them. So overall, this process challenges the accepted conceptual and practical parameters of words and provides new ways of defining and eroding borders imposed by partial definitions. And I use meta-ideologizing to critique the ways in which the concept of access is employed and to talk about how access must constitute more than just entry. So firstly, members who know when it's illegal and the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Coalition mobilize the concept of access that expand beyond enrollment, and included recognizing that access and so-called success in education is dependent on structures beyond schools.